Hello, hello, everybody. Let's see. We should be live as well on Facebook, but I don't see it showing up. So give me a moment so I can share it with everyone in the Facebook group. Let's see. Yeah, it is there. So share in the group. In the meantime, I see that on Instagram, we're telling your followers that we're live. So I will bear with you as well, so you can join me. And today we're going to speak about three language mistakes that multilingual yoga teachers make. And I'm very, very excited for this chat because I believe it's going to be really, really useful for you. But I also want to give a little bit of explanation as to why I think these mistakes are made, why they actually show up. So bear with me. I'm just going to post it here. And then we start. So, 3 language mistakes. Now, learning a foreign language comes with unique challenges. You know, when learning anything, we go through a learning process, and every learning process has challenges. But learning a language has very unique ones. So depending on your mother tongue, some languages may be easier for you to learn than others. As you know, for example, Romance languages such as French, Spanish, Portuguese, or Italian have a lot more in common with each other than, for example, Germanic languages. Yeah, Germanic languages could be Dutch, English, or German. But even when the roots or the origins of a language are the same, learning vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, and cultural aspects, all of these things are different. Yeah, they really are unique to every language. So if you've been to general language classes before, you've probably focused on training your receptive skills. Receptive skills are reading and listening. And your productive skills. And your productive skills are writing and speaking. So these are the skills that you first train to help you become familiar with the language itself, but also help you become familiar with start using it and how to use it. So in this stage, you will probably learn new words, new vocabulary, to speak maybe about the weather, grammar, to ask questions, maybe ask your way to the train station, yeah, and focus also on sound and pronunciation by practicing maybe tongue twisters. Yeah, these are things that are very common in general language classes. And I've done all of these things for years and years before I started Enga Unite, when I was just teaching English. But as you progress these topics, the topics that you, when you train these 4 language skills, become more challenging, yeah? So reading, listening, writing, and speaking are also the skills that you eventually need to prove your level of the language in tests and exams. So in my experience, most of the time, the purpose of a general language class is to help you pass an exam or to help you pass a certain test, right? Unfortunately, there is only so much that a general language class can cover. This is even more unfortunate if you want to learn language for teaching yoga, because the language aspects that we use in a yogic setting are very specific and also very, very sensitive. Right? So general language classes usually do not provide you with that knowledge. And they also don't give you the skill practice that you need to teach yoga in a foreign language. So yoga teachers and yogis in general, but especially for those here, yoga teachers that have never studied language for yoga classes often make mistakes that can cause physical or emotional harm. They can damage their student-teacher relationships or simply cause a lot of confusion. And obviously you want none of those things to happen in your yoga classes. So in this training, I want to discuss 3 points, 3 very common language mistakes that I see teachers in our community make, that I see teachers on YouTube make, that I hear teachers that I go to classes with in other countries make. Because my aim here at Enga Unite, and especially of this training here today, is to help you learn the language that you need to teach yoga. And the training today will help you to analyze your language use, and if you could improve it to make yourself understood better, to guide your students with more compassion, and also strengthen your student-teacher relationships. Yeah, because your student-teacher relationships are the thing that your students come back to for your classes, and also the way for you to gain more students or gain more clients, right? So the reason that I explain a little bit about why you make these mistakes for people that are joining us later or that join the live right now really is because this is not what you learn in a general language class, and for those here in a general English language class. So mistake number 1, if you have questions about this, anyone, write in the comments so we can have a little bit of a discussion at the end of it. So let me drink a sip of water. Mistake number one, and maybe you can guess this already, are direct translations. So direct translations happen when you translate something literally from one language to the other language. It can also mean translating each word individually. But think of all the expressions in your own language, idioms, maybe synonyms, and think of those things in other languages and how different the grammar can be. Unfortunately, language is really not that simple. You can't translate things directly from one to another language. So each language expresses their ideas differently. They have unique words, they vary from cultural associations, different grammar structures, and distinct ways of ordering information. And they also come with their own sense of humor, right? Their own sense of humor, or maybe irony, the ways that they show emotion. Each language, and even every dialect of that language, has its own style of communication. And therefore, there is often no direct equivalent translation of the same expression in both languages. So when at the moment of translation, the meaning or the feeling and the effect of the language that you want to translate it to change. And if that happens, we use the word or we use the expression lost in translation. So lost in translation means that when we translate something, it loses effectiveness and it loses meaning. So there's a lot of translation apps, for example, and they have improved a lot over the years, but they aren't always correct. And they are often very literal, and they don't consider connotations, associations, the emotional things that brings up in people, or a wider context and alternatives. So when you use translation apps for your yoga classes or to translate your cues, your instructions, for example, it's very problematic because it means that there is no intention behind the words that you choose. Yeah, instead, if you use these apps, they are selected by a robot who probably only had one option in the first place, and you don't have the freedom to choose from several words. Yeah, there's no choice for you to choose your tone of voice, or whether you speak with humor or seriousness. And as a result of that, you can no longer communicate authentically, authentically as yourself, because your message doesn't include those same feelings or your same personality. Now, it's not only bad to translate because it's not accurate, to translate directly, let's say that. It's not accurate, but it can also really affect your students. And it can result in confusing, offensive, non-inclusive language. Yeah. And especially in the context of teaching yoga, and in the context of wanting to make our classes accessible and inclusive, this can be really harmful. So the language that we use in the yoga class is very specific. It's descriptive. It can be instructional, metaphorical, emotional. Yeah, and our students are very sensitive to what you say. It directly affects the way that they perceive your class and your teaching style. So the way that you teach your students also affect the way that they connect their mind, body, and breath, right? And they come to your classes to have some type of relief, maybe to become present, to disconnect from the outside world. There's a lot of different reasons that your students join your classes. But the aim for you is that they can follow you, they can follow your guidance, your words, your verbal cues, without having to think or without having to look up to you to see what you're doing. And it's also important that your language is considerate and appropriate for them. Remember that we want to meet our students where they are at. Yeah, so for those reasons, paying attention to the words that you use, paying attention to translations is crucial. And it's often a big mistake because it's very easy to use an app, translate it directly, and just start using that in your classes. But it's inaccurate often, and it can be really harmful for your student-teacher relationships. So if you want to know more about this and how to translate your cues and your instructions, I've got a blog. Yes, I do have a blog and a podcast episode specifically about this. And I believe it's called Why It's a Bad Idea to Translate Your Scripts. So have a look at that. It's on the website and on the podcast. And you can find the podcast on Spotify, on Google Podcasts. But look for Why It's a Bad Idea to Translate Your Scripts. So that was mistake number 1, language mistakes. Number 2 is not bearing in mind or not taking into account, not considering cultural and individual differences. Big mistake. So when you learn a language, you'll see that there's a lot of cultural and individual differences. It's inevitable. You will definitely come across these. The words and language that we use have very strong emotional associations linked to cultural and individual differences. Just yesterday, I've got a friend, she's a high school friend. I've known her for maybe 16, 17 years. I don't know, very long time. Maybe even longer. And she's a Spanish teacher here in the Netherlands. Hey, Sarah, so good to see you. So she's a language teacher. She teaches Spanish in the Netherlands. And she told me about one of her colleagues. Her colleague is from Suriname. So that's a country in South America, but teaches Spanish to Dutch students. So they were speaking about adjectives that describe people, so adjectives of appearance. Now, to give examples, she took students from the classroom to show who would be considered fat, skinny, but also white or black. Now, this language, these types of adjectives to describe people are really, really, really sensitive in the day and age that we live right now. Now, according to the teacher and her cultural background, there was nothing wrong with taking examples in the classroom, putting the students in front of other students to show this person is skinny and fat or white or black. Yeah, according to her cultural background. Now, for the students coming from different cultures, these things are highly sensitive, highly offensive, causing very, very uncomfortable situations. Also very likely causing trauma, because this is really not considered appropriate anymore, right? It should have never have, but definitely in the way that we create awareness, and especially in a yogic setting where we want to be really aware of the way that we speak and communicate with people, this is really not done. So things that are considered normal in your language or in your culture, or for you individually, but also, for example, humor and irony, aren't received the same way in every language or in every culture. So when learning a language, and especially learning to teach yoga in a foreign language, remember that this type of language, and I'm speaking of the example of adjectives that describe people, but really what I mean here is connotations and associations that we have with a word. We have to pay attention to cultural and individual differences, to inclusive and outdated language, the expression and the tone of voice, emotion that we express in our tone of voice, connotations and associations, but also trauma-informed language and fear-based language. Yeah. Now you may think, what is she all talking about? What are all these things? All of these things, all of these language aspects or these language points, I teach and I cover in the Yoga Vocabulary Builder and in the English for Yoga Teachers course. We speak about these things in a lot more depth. I dare to say it's actually one of the top 5 things that are most useful when you first learn to teach yoga in a foreign language. And for those here, when you learn to teach yoga in English. Yeah, I think it's one of the things that is in the top 5 of the most valuable when you learn or when you study with us. But if you want to learn more about this already and want to do some research to this yourself, I've got more blogs and more podcast episodes specifically on these topics. So go to our website and go to the podcast and look for ways of being inclusive in your English yoga classes and ways of including everybody in English yoga classes. Yeah, there's a lot more information about this. But that's mistake number 2, connotations and associations, especially linked to cultural and individual differences. Definitely recommend checking out those resources. They're all free. You can all find them on the website. Mistake number three, and this is for the people that have learned English for a while. Maybe they speak English fluently or with quite some proficiency already. It's trying to sound like a native or showing off your level of English. Mistake number 3. And I get this. Yeah, I really do get this. There is a point, at some point, you realize that you're actually pretty confident and you can have quite advanced conversations. As you progress, you find your voice in a foreign language as well. And now the tendency is to show off your proficiency by using advanced vocabulary, metaphors, terms, idioms, expressions, phrasal verbs, grammar structures. Yeah, if you're not showing off, you may use them. Yeah, you may use them as a way to practice and become more fluent, using them in your daily conversations as well. Now, this is a mistake if you're teaching yoga in a foreign language. because your aim as a yoga teacher is to teach and communicate accurately, accessibly, and inclusively, especially if your students are also non-native English non-native English speakers. Yeah, if you have non-native English speaking yogis in your class, all of these advanced structures are absolutely pointless. They don't add anything to your classes. Remember that you're teaching yoga. You're not doing an exam. There's no one that you need to prove to what your level is. Yeah. So overcomplicating your language causes inaccessible communication. That means that your students may not understand you. A misunderstanding on a physical level will cause your students to be disrupted and have to think about what you're doing, what you're saying, what you want them to do. Yeah, so they will disconnect maybe from the breath. They have to look up to what you're doing or maybe look at others in the room. Maybe watch you more often and be disrupted from the practice or the connection that they have with themselves. So all of that is already taken away from the present and really providing the space for the student to connect to the practice and their body. Now, on an emotional or a mental level, you have to remember that you are a guide, you're a role model. Yeah, therefore, at the point that there's misunderstanding, the chance that your students start to doubt themselves, they start to think that they are not good enough or not as good as others in the room. Maybe they start to think that they are bad at yoga because they don't understand what you want them to do, or it's not for them. You can avoid all of this by making your communication accessible. Yeah, get to know your students, have conversations with them, and meet them where they are at. Or better even, simplify your language by using very simple cueing formulas or cueing instructions. Yeah, simplify your language because you're not doing an exam. There's no one that you need to prove your level of English to. It really is all about making yourself understood by your students. So this is one thing that I really, really want to help you with, because I see it's very difficult for people to choose the right words, to find out what vocabulary works, to form sentences that are simple and easy to understand, that are also easy for you to remember when you teach. And for that reason, I've got a really exciting mini course coming up from the 10th to the 12th of March. And in this mini course, you will learn to cue, and cueing means giving instructions with confidence. So I'm going to help you find a vocabulary that you truly need, help you with cueing formulas, so sentence structures to form your cues. And on the last day, I will give you a 6-step process that you can use to actually cue with confidence. So I would love for you, sorry, there was a bird flying over and I got really distracted. So I would love for you to join this. I would love for you to join this mini course. You can register for free until the 10th of March. You can find a link in my bio here on Instagram. And on Facebook, I will add it to the comments or the description of the post. Because I can help you with all of these mistakes. I can help you with writing simple cues that are easy to understand and easy for you to remember, so that you can finally teach with more confidence and more clarity, and make your classes more accessible and inclusive that way. All right. So in the comments, let me know, do you have any questions about this? Any questions about language mistakes, but also questions about choosing your vocabulary, your words, anything that you would like to know more about? Let me see if I see any comments here on Facebook. And also let me know if this training today was useful for you. I'm very curious and eager to find out if this training is useful for you right now? Do you have starting points? Can you go do something with this from here? All right. Oh, this is a different video. All right then. Well, if you're watching the replay or if you go through the day and you've got other questions coming up, always feel free to write. Send me an email at annie@engaunite.com or a private message on Facebook or on Instagram. And let me quickly summarize what we spoke about today so that you can have a think about this for yourself. The reason why, so the topic of today was 3 language mistakes that multilingual yoga teachers make. The reason why these mistakes happen mostly is because we don't learn the language that we need for yoga classes in a general language class. This is not the language that we really need in a yogic setting. And it's a little bit more structured, more specific, and definitely more sensitive. So the language mistakes that I discussed with you today are: number 1, direct translations; number 2, cultural and individual differences; and number 3, trying to sound like a native or showing off your proficiency. Yeah, so have a think about these for yourself. If you want to check out our resources that give you more details on this, you can find them on our blog at engaunite.com or on the podcast Your Yoga in English on every platform that you probably can use. And sign up for the mini course, the Q with Confidence mini course, happening from the 10th to the 12th of March. And remember that there's free registration until the 10th of March. So make use of that right now. All right. Any questions? I'm here for you. I wish you a great rest of your day. And I hope to see all of you very soon. Next week for our weekly live training and on the Q with Confidence mini course, 10 to 12 of March. Sending you all lots of love and speak to you all very, very soon. Mwah. Goodbye, everyone.